I was hoping that Mr. Alexander would be here to teach most of this because he's an attorney at Liberty Counsel and he was involved in our case. But it's called Shurtleff v. Boston and, of course, advancing our camp mission. So here's a photo of last year's camp. How many people here last year? A lot of hands went up. You know, it was kind of funny. There were two cannons there, but we couldn't see them because we were covered with them. During a parade we were in, we were pointing out that Joe Biden is wrong. You can own cannons, privately owned cannons. He made an issue of that. You can't own cannons of the Second Amendment. Oh, yeah? Ask that to Mr. Wanager. Okay, so this year's camp is coming to an end tomorrow morning, but we have a weekend event coming up. I know some of you probably won't be able to make it because of the distance, but it's going to be at Tuftonboro, Camp Sentinel, and that is just 2 towns away from us, so it's not as long of a drive for us. And we do have a great program lined up. Reverend Stevie Kraft is one of the instructors. I think Professor Soon committed to that too, didn't you, Professor? Yeah, he said, oh yeah. Yeah, he's going to be there. And I hope Mrs. White will be available, I'm not certain. And I got a call just last week from a manager of a Christian singer. Her last name is Owens. What's her first name? Does anybody remember? Natasha Owens, thank you. And her songs she sings come right off our songbook, I think. So, and he asked if it would be okay to do a concert at the camp Saturday. I said, well, yeah, we could do it Saturday evening. And so stay tuned for that. And not only that, but he said, we heard a lot about you folks, and Natasha's going to go on a 10-city tour. And we'd like some of your Camp Constitution speakers to come along with us and sort of give a little instruction during the singing, between songs. And I said, I think we can squeeze it in our busy schedule. So, and that was due to a radio station producer down in Rochester, New Hampshire, WORD, Christian. Actually, they own about half a dozen Christian stations. Now, as our organization seems to be growing, we started, I say we, it was mainly Mrs. Roberta Stewart. I think that was her brainchild. And I had really nothing to do with it. I didn't say, you need to have a ladies' weekend retreat. That's what we need to do. I think Roberta said we should have it. I said, absolutely, go for it. And they've had, I think, several, and they had a spring retreat up here, or they call it an advance, because even though they're up in the mountain, but they're promoting, we're going forward, we're not advancing. But anyway, so we're very excited about that. I think it's going to be growing as time goes on. And our Samuel Blumenfeld Archive, how many people homeschool? Someone asked me, Mr. Keitler asked me how many homeschoolers. I said, I think about 80%. Is that about right? Yeah. The Sam Blumenfeld Archive is a great resource, and people all over the world are using it, and we're really excited about it. I also want to point out that, when we talk about activism, I don't just preach it. I like to live it, and I've been that way for many, many years. But I moved to a new part of the New England 2 years ago, December of 2020, and we hit the ground running. I started writing a monthly column in a weekly newspaper. I befriended the local editor. We're good friends now. He comes over our house, his wife, and one of his sons. And one of the things I do, and I think most people in this group probably hate to see litter strewn around. And I thought, you know what, I want to volunteer our organization. So we sponsor 2 miles of highway on Route 28 in Alton, and we had a couple of cleanups already. I tell people it's the cleanest 2 miles of highway in the whole state of New Hampshire. I don't know if that's the truth or not, but that's my story, and I'm sticking with it, right? I'm just right about liberals showing up just to throw trash because it's our 2 miles of stretch, but I don't think that's happening. This Blumenfeld Archive is not just, I said, it's around the world. Just recently, last year or so, a gentleman from God Knows, that's his first name, God Knows, from Zimbabwe, I almost said Rhodesia. He runs a Christian school in one of the poorest pro-communist, if not communist, countries in the world. And he found out about our archives. He went online and discovered it. And he started downloading the pages of the Alphaphonics, teaching it to his children, his students. His school started out about 4 years ago with about 30 students and now has over 400 students. And he asked if we would, that's right. He asked if we would donate some of the alpha phonics. I said, by all means, I'd be happy to. But it costs a lot of money to ship stuff to communist countries, and once it gets there, that's just, the tracking number will take you to in the country. After that, it's nothing but prayer. But I don't think the communists want the alpha phonics to have. I guess if they realized that, actually, these are more dangerous than AKs when you think about it. Fully functioning illiterate people are dangerous to tyranny. I mean literate, I'm sorry, not illiterate. Literate people are dangerous to tyranny. So I'm sure down the road they'll be confiscating these as weapons of mass destruction. No, weapons of mass instruction. That's what we call it, right? And so I'm hoping at some point to bring God knows into this country. What's fascinating is that people in communist countries want intensive phonics, but in this country, public schools want nothing, government schools want nothing to do with it. And my friend Adrian Villa, who was one of our benefactors, he, back in 2009 or 10, he asked me if I could find a particular thing he was looking for. It was a chapter of a book called From Farm Boy to Financier. By the man who wrote it was Frank Vanderlip. He was one of the attendees at that infamous Jekyll Island meeting, where the creature from Jekyll Island, where the Federal Reserve Bank was hatched. He said, if you get that chapter, find it. He said, I'll put it in print. And it took me a couple of years, but we found it, and that became Camp Constitution Press. So we've been publishing things ever since. It's not exactly a gigantic publishing arm, but we're very happy that we're able to offer these. Some things that have been out of print for a while, we put back in print, and sometimes we've got new things. And Reverend Kraft is, he wrote the foreword to a couple of items that we recently put in print. One of our, you remember Dr. Felicia Nace that was here a couple of years ago? Yeah. She's co-authored a book about the Wayne Williams murder. He was a serial murderer in Atlanta. And she asked if she could reprint something called Eugenics and the Creation of a Black Underclass. She wanted to put it in the book. And I said, by all means, do that. And I thought, it would be a good idea if we put it back in print. And we did, and Reverend Kraft wrote the foreword to that. It's also available as a free download on the St. Blumenfield archive. Now, getting into Shurtleff v. Boston, I became the full-time director. Shortly after I got a call from Reverend Stevie Kraft. I had been unemployed for a little bit. My unemployment was running out, and we had been raising money for me to have a full-time salary, but I didn't feel confident there was enough money to justify it. And I was going to take a job in the post office, believe it or not, because, hey, we have to eat. We have one of those habits. We have to eat. We have to stay warm in the wintertime. And I didn't want to do it. And I got a call from Reverend Kraft. He said, Hallie, you don't want to sell your what was it? Yeah, for a bowl of post office porridge. And you know what? I had a sense of peace. And then I spoke to my wife, and she had that sense of, and my family members. I said, and there's been no looking back, and God has blessed us with this great ministry that I'm honored to participate. So I can't just sit on my hands waiting for the next camp to come around. I got to go out there making things happen, doing things, promoting the mission. And I've been a full-time coordinator for the John Birch Society for 26 years, so I know how to do that. And back in June of 2017, Pastor Bruce Wall, he's an inner-city pastor in Dorchester section of Boston, he invited me to come to a prayer meeting at the Boston City Hall in the mayor's office. Now, I do want to point out that Mayor Marty Walsh at the time, who now works for the Biden administration, Secretary of Labor. Biden calls him Walsh Marty. But it's Marty Walsh. He was nowhere to be found. He had nothing to do with it. He didn't want to be, and I don't think he wanted to be too close to prayerful people. And the group was made up of blacks, whites, Hispanics, Asians, and probably a couple of other ethnic groups. And we prayed, as the Bible tells us, to pray for our leaders. It doesn't say just pray for those with an R beside them or a D beside them or the ones you like. It says pray for your leaders. And we did. And we prayed for peace. We prayed for racial harmony and other things. And we sang some hymns and we gave testimonials. And I thought the Christian church in Boston really needs to step up to the plate. When I'm talking about the true believers of various denominations. So I kind of tell people it was sort of an inside joke, my inner P.T. Barnum. But it was really, I believe, the Holy Spirit that fly the Christian flag on Boston City Hall Plaza and do it in conjunction with Constitution Day. Now, Constitution Day is September 17th. They actually make a whole week where you have to celebrate and honor the Constitution. What's ironic is back, I think it was in the early 80s during the Reagan administration, it may have happened later, that any school, any college, or I think even government school that gets federal money has to set aside some time to talk about the Constitution. Is that constitutional? Absolutely not. Because you're not supposed to be getting the money to begin with. Right? But we take advantage of that sometimes. We have people, and I speak to colleges, and on Constitution Day I get a call, can you come and speak? Yeah, sure, I got a clear day, but let's make it happen. So what we wanted to do was to have the flag, we were going to fly this flag, and then have several speakers. Reverend Kraft would have been one of them. Pastor William Levy, some of you remember William Levy. He was at our camp in 2019. He was from the Sudan, and he had an incredible story. He was about to be executed by the Muslim army, in the Sudanese army. He was able to escape into the jungle and got over here eventually. And he was going to just speak about the blessings of liberty as a U.S. citizen. And Richard Howell, who's been a speaker here over the years, he was going to give a little, not a big speech, but a little overview of Boston's rich Christian history from Governor John Winthrop in his famous sermon, City on a Hill, which, by the way, part of that sermon is on a bas relief on Boston Common. What? I thought it was separation of church and state. I can't believe that. And Pope John Paul II's visit. And there's also a historical marker commemorating that famous trip. It was the first time a sitting pope ever visited the United States. He stopped in Boston at the time. So I tried to get a permit, and the lady I dealt with, she was very helpful, and we flied the Gadsden flag about 5 years earlier without any difficulty, maybe 4 years earlier. Some of you remember Pastor Lear, Garrett Lear? Can you picture this guy walking through downtown Boston with a musket in his black robe regiment? Well, that's what he did. It was a fun day, I can say the least. Somebody said to him, "Is that real?" He said, "What do you think, I carry toys around at my age?" So anyway, I told them what I wanted to do, that we would do it on a weekday, before lunch, right after lunch, and that we would fly this thing referred to as a Christian flag. And I chose it because it's non-denominational, no copyright on it, so it's not a denominational flag. There are some various denominations have the flag. And it's interesting, too, that the city of Boston was founded, I think it was September 16th or 15th in 1630. So we were going to kind of combine both events, the history of Boston and the Constitution. And so I was getting a little, it took me about a month before I got an official no. There was some emails, exchanges, and a few phone calls. And she called me up, this lady, and she said, I'm sorry, but you've been denied. And she said, "I know this isn't over." Oh, she was right about that. She didn't know how right she was about that. And I said, can I get an official response, either in a letter or in an email? So that afternoon, I got an email from the man who became the defendant in the case, a Mr. Rooney, and he said that it's a violation of the First Amendment, separation of church and state. Now, the problem is, I think his problem is he never attended Camp Constitution, or else he would have known that that's not true. But it would have saved the city a whole lot of money in legal fees, too. Probably about $1.5 million. So if he just invested maybe $250 at Camp Constitution, or even watched one of our YouTube videos, he would have saved the city $1.5 million at least in legal fees. So then they said to me in the letter, you can consider, if you want to fly a secular flag, we'll consider that. And I said, well, no, I'm not going to do that. We want to fly this flag. We didn't want to call this the Camp Constitution flag because it's not. It is the Christian flag. We could have. In fact, we designed a flag. Where's Mr. Krutov David? David designed it. And it was interesting too that I didn't really have two flags in mind, but young Leanne, was it Leanne Chu? She decided, I got some young people that were just, some of the junior campers. I said, yeah, let's have a junior camper flag and a regular camper. So we did that. I thought it was sweet, having all these nice it was kind of hard to choose. There were so many nice ones. So anyway, so what I did, I sent out a news release that evening to the local media about what was going on. Not one member of the media responded. I also got a list of, I don't know, about 80 churches in Greater Boston through the Christian radio station. Not one responded as well, kind of expected. But a friend of mine said, Lynn Roberts of Second Amendment Sisters of Massachusetts, said that I should try to get hold of Liberty Counsel. Now, Liberty Counsel, as I think everybody here knows, is a Christian legal entity that does pro bono, and that means free. They don't charge us anything. And I got a hold of them that night. I went to the website, lc.org, and it says contact, and I put in what was going on. The very next morning, I get a call from Mr. Richard Mast, he's the one that sort of screens the cases. He said, we want to take your case. We like it. And they take cases based on three things. One, that it's winnable. Two, that it will set a precedent. And three, the organization, individual they represent is credible. So I think we fly in colors on all three, I would say. So they sent a demand letter to the city of Boston. And the demand letter said, let them fly their flag, or we're going to file a lawsuit. And they kind of doubled down, and they wouldn't do it. And I remember watching Marty Walsh on the news, and he said, well, they want to fly. We'll be happy to sit down with them. They never reached out to me. Not one person from the city of Boston, after this happened, reached out to me, even my city councilor. So this was the headline on the Boston Herald. I was really surprised. I walked down from my home to the corner store, and I thought, oh my God, Kim Il-sung got top billing, but we got second billing. No fly zone. City Hall refused to raise Christian flag. Group threatens the lawsuit. We deserve a voice too. So we actually lost at the lower courts. I remember that we filed a suit about a year later in July, and that generated even more media attention. And we had our first hearing in August of 19, and Reverend Kraft and Pastor Earl Wallace and a few others, we actually got up at 4 in the morning and drove to the court where we didn't have to testify, but we wanted to be there. And so we lost, and we appealed it to the First Circuit Court of Appeals, lost that. And then in, it was January of last year where the appeals court ruled against us 3-0. And then in June of last year, we appealed it to the U.S. Supreme Court. In fact, Jonathan Alexander actually delivered the appeal to the Supreme Court, walked right across the street from his office. And September 30th of last year, the Supreme Court agreed to hear the case. Now, the Supreme Court gets about 800 cases a year. They only hear less than 1%. So if God's hand wasn't in that, I can't imagine what would be. What else? So it was, so from September on, we had all kinds of media coverage, and I don't have anything to do with what they call the case. I would prefer Camp Constitution versus, but they use my first name. Just like I didn't design the Hal Shurtleff Award. Somebody else did that. And they had oral argument on January 18th, and only our attorney, you see the cartoon in the middle? That's somebody's rendition. It shows a bunch of people. There wasn't a bunch of people in the courtroom. That was a little media license there. But we had 18 or 19 amicus briefs on our behalf, including the ACLU, which proves the point that a stop clock is right twice a day. The ACLU actually said in their brief something to the effect that while we don't agree with anything they support, which is, I'm glad that's what they wrote, because I wouldn't want to, but they did agree with us on this one. And they also, the president of the ACLU wrote an op-ed piece in the Washington Post saying that we should win the case. And the Biden administration's Justice Department. Now, I don't think Joe Biden said, I know Hal's been critical of me, but what the heck? He's a good old boy. Yeah, he's from Boston, and so is it Marshwaldy. So we should just. No, I don't think that was the case. But we also had 12 attorney generals from around the country support us. And a number of Christian-type groups, Americans, Freedom Alliance, Mr. Michael King's group. I don't know if they sent an amicus brief, but they were very supportive. We had 9 amicus briefs against us, including the National Council of Churches. No surprise there. And separation of, religious, there's a group called Freedom from Religion. And there was some very left-wing Jewish groups, and there was a Sikh group. And others that signed amicus, and I think there was 9 attorney generals against us, and Washington D.C. itself, including Maine, Massachusetts, New Jersey, No kidding, right? So we went down for a prayer vigil the night before, and you should see poor Reverend Kraft. He had the scarf on. The Liberty Council made a scarf just for us. It was cold that night, right, Rev? But we made it. And then the next morning we had a wonderful rally, and these are some of the attendees at the rally, having our banner, which I left at home, but I think we're better off having this flag in the background anyway. And we had a member of Congress that Reverend Kraft knew from years ago, Victoria Herzl.
Yeah, Herzl.
And she's running for the U.S. Senate. I was told that she made an extra effort to be there. She'd been following the case for a while, and this was on Monday the 18th, which is Martin Luther King Day, so many of the members of Congress were just coming in the afternoon. We had, there's Andrew Beckworth in the back to your right. He's the president of Mike King's organization. And we had people from the Frederick Douglass Foundation, and we had Concerned Women for America, and many other groups. So it was very gratifying to see all the support. The Mordecai Mission was there, and Barbara from Harlem was there. She had been an instructor a few years ago. It was very, very gratifying. And one of the things here in Boston is they happily fly the flag of Communist China. And what makes it worse, not is it just like a disinterested, well, we're just doing it because a civic organization. They have members of the city council participate in the ceremony. There was a state senator and a state rep there one time, including Ayanna Pressley when she was a city councilor. I remember seeing her on the stage praising the communist revolution. But when it comes to Christians, not so much. And what's interesting too, before our case was decided, in New Britain, Connecticut, they were flying the Christian flag, and this was last year, and the ACLU at Connecticut said, sure, you can fly it. And then here in Michigan, Muskegon, and I tried to reach out to some of the folks that never got back to me. They took no for an answer. And when we're right, you don't take no for an answer. Right. The Constitution says something, you don't take no. So one of the ironies too is that it's not a good photo here, but the city of Boston's official flag and seal has a Bible verse on it from 1 Kings. It's in Latin, so how many people speak a little bit of Latin? Maybe a traditional Catholic or two, or some attorney. But it says, may God honor us may God favor us as he did our forefathers. I think God's going to have trouble honoring today's Boston leadership, I think, pretty much so. Now, the flag in the middle is known as the Bunker Hill flag. I didn't have room to put it up here. And the only difference is the colors are reversed a little bit. You got the red cross, and you have the pine tree on the left side of the cross. And that pine tree, by the way, does anybody know the significance of that pine tree? Why would they put a pine tree? Maybe they're greenies. Maybe they belong to Greenpeace. Anybody know? Any Campano, not adult. I'm sure some of the adults know. Where's Marley? Come on, Marley must know. You don't know? Oh my goodness. We're going to teach you something you haven't learned before. You didn't know? Yes, sir. Who's got their hand up? Stand up. Stand up and tell me. What's that? Heaven. Oh, like the appeal to heaven. No, that's a good answer, but it's not the correct one. Yes, sir. All right. Well, King George III, as I say, Great Britain, they told the colonists that all pine trees that were more than 28 inches in diameter belonged to the king, even if it was on your property. And in the early 1770s, they said, guess what? Or maybe it was 1750s. We're making that 12 inches. So if you cut any tree down that's bigger than 12 inches, you're going to pay a fine. You may even go to jail. There was actually a riot here. They call it the Pine Tree Riot. Oh, it's pouring rain, my goodness. The Pine Tree Riot in Ware, New Hampshire. Not say Ware, yes, W-E-A-R-E. Just recently, they celebrated their 250th anniversary? Yeah. And, of course, the Christian flag on the right. Now, there were some of our detractors are telling us that this flag has been repurposed as now a symbol of white supremacy. Well, I was interviewed by ABC prior to the Supreme Court argument, and I said it's pretty ludicrous since it was designed by a couple of Sunday school teachers from Coney Island back in the 1890s. I think white supremacy was the last thing on their mind. In fact, you see this flag flying, the Christian flag flying in churches, all in churches that are predominantly black, predominantly white, really doesn't matter. So here was the New York Times. We got so much media over this, I just couldn't keep up with it. I mean, literally hundreds and hundreds of articles, hard copy newspapers, online articles, television networks. The Supreme Court will decide whether Boston, which allows many kinds of groups to raise flags outside the City Hall, can reject one bearing the Latin cross. And most of the people, even the left, was saying they should win this case. When we were listening to the oral argument across the street at Liberty Counsel's building, some of the attorneys that were Liberty Counsel, they were listening and smiling. They said, even Kagan, they were sympathetic. And they said, we should win this thing 9-0. And this was Liberty Counsel. They had a great job. We had a press conference, and they did a wonderful job for us. And this was some of the media. There's something called SCOTUS blog. And the reporters aren't allowed in, but you can actually record the oral argument. That was just a recent thing the last couple of years. So you notice Gorsuch on the right, next to the last one next to right, and the empty seat. Well, Gorsuch wouldn't wear a mask, so Kagan would sit in the back room. She wouldn't sit next to Gorsuch. She was afraid she would get COVID or something. And that's an illustration of the man on the left. That's our attorney, Matt Staver. And the gentleman on the right, depicted in the sketch, is the City of Boston's attorney. He was from what you call one of these very prestigious Brahmin law firms, so I'm sure their costs are pretty expensive. And he didn't do such a great job, which I'm glad. And this was some of the comments here. Today, the Supreme Court seemed united in favor of Liberty Counsel's argument that the censorship is unconstitutional and that Boston was wrong to deny the Christian flag a white banner with a red cross on a blue background in the upper left corner. During today's argument, Boston's attorney Douglas Hollywood Drymeyer admitted that if the High Court finds that if the city created a public forum, that Boston had no defense. Imagine hiring a lawyer, the opposition, and he's making our case. He's probably going to try to bill us, When the city's attorney attempted to justify the policy to fit their agenda, Justice Alito said, you did some after-the-fact gerrymandering on your policy and reverse engineered it. City cast religion into the same category as speech deemed offensive by censoring the religious viewpoint. Hollywood Drymeyer also stated that the city's goal is to foster diversity of communities and commemorate events or occasions. In response, Clarence Thomas, and we think we need to give Clarence Thomas a good hand for many other things besides this, right? Stated that if Christians are not part of that diversity the city purports to support, that's limited diversity. Justice Amy Coney Barrett also asked the city attorney, isn't celebrating Constitution Day considered an event? I like to, a lot of people don't even know what Constitution Day is. So not only are we teaching people about the First Amendment, but we're teaching people about this important day in our history. Justice Brett Kavanaugh also acknowledged that it seems the Establishment Clause is not the issue in this case, since there has not been equal treatment of religious groups or religious speech. Justice Neil Gorsuch, without his mask on, also noted that the city cast religion into the same category as speech deemed offensive by censoring the religious viewpoint. And there's us after the hearing, having a press conference, and you see Jonathan Alexander to the right, and me right next to him, and that's Matt Staver is the man at the podium, and that's his wife to his left, and Roger Gainham is the man to his wife's left. He was the kid that did most of the work, and Harry, I can't remember Harry's name. Harry's the one who said, now the fun begins. Now we're going to be building the city for hours. That's when the fun begins. He's a character. And this was interesting too. Now, when you look at a Supreme Court decision, you don't really think about one of the justices talking about the architecture of the city of Boston. This might be the first time in the Supreme Court's history that the architect has said the design has since proved somewhat more controversial, named world's ugliest building. So he did like it. I agree. I can agree with that. I don't have much agreement with him, but I agree that it's one of the world. I call it neo-Stalinism, but it's called brutalist architecture. So here is some of the media we got. Supreme Court rules against Boston and Christian Boston. I was interviewed by Fox and Friends, Newsmax. It was very interesting. Does anybody watch Newsmax? The Rob Schmidt show comes on. It was coming on at 10 o'clock at night, and I was all set. I was sitting in front of my computer, all ready to go, and that's when the Roe v. Wade case decision was leaked. And I thought, I mean, that's still a much bigger case than ours. And I thought, oh, they're going to scrub me. They're going to bump me. Because I was going to be on another Fox program in 18, and I got something else happen, and they bumped me. So the producer comes on. He says, would you be willing to talk about Roe v. Wade? I says, sure I will. You kidding me? You know, I don't think they knew my position on it. And Governor Huckabee was the guest right before me, Mike Huckabee. And he was asked about it. And then they asked me, and I pretty much second the motion of Governor Huckabee that it won't end abortion, but it will make it, in some states it will throw it back to the states where it probably should have belonged. And then I made a case for the movie Roe v. Wade. I said, your viewers should watch this movie, funded in part by Mike Lindell. And I said it has a lot of dialogue between the justices, a lot of the dirty dealings that went on. Two of the justices that were involved in the case had either a wife or a daughter working for Planned Parenthood. That means they should have recused themselves. And I plugged the movie, and I plugged Dr. Mildred Jefferson. I said my old friend and late friend and my new friend Stacey Dash, who plays the part of Dr. Mildred Jefferson. And then I went on to talk about the case. And I think I was interviewed by 20 or 25 different entities. And it was was a very brief interview. It was the Word and Way. It was supposed to be some kind of Baptist publication. This was the smear camp. It was a smear job. It was a hit piece. I kind of laughed at it. It said, the man behind Shurtleff v. Boston. Oh my goodness, I'm an anti-vaxxer, I believe in the Second Amendment. It was great. So, and this was the Herald, the headlines in the Boston Herald, the May 3rd. Supreme spanking. Supreme says Christian flags should fly at City Hall. And that was beautiful. Now, our friendly neighborhood devil worshippers that probably live a short distance from the Soons, right? They just tweeted this, and they got articles all over the country. The Satanic Temple requested Boston fly its flag after Supreme Court ruling. Well, they actually did us a favor because they're telling, now the cities will say, we're not going to fly any flag. And that's exactly what's happening. Based on this case, dozens of towns around the country won't fly anything but the U.S. flag, the state flag, the town flag, and the POW/MIA flag, which I believe is the way it should go. You want to fly your own flag on your own property, so be it. And so this case is, and it's not just about flags. In some public schools, you can't bring candy canes because the candy cane is shaped like a J. J stands for Jesus. And there's a Christian allegory behind the candy cane. Or when someone sneezes, what do you say? Get out of here, you got COVID. No, God bless you. You can't say God, that's against the First Amendment. We know it's nonsense. They're taking this First Amendment to separate the church and state, which is not even in there. And there's a case called the Lemon Law, the Lemon case. And this is the case that was used to get prayer out of school happened in the 60s, but it was used to really restrict freedom of speech. It was a total miscarriage. And some of the justices said the Lemon Law is dead because of this case, and also Coach Kennedy, Joe Kennedy, the coach in Washington State, who was praying on the 50-yard line. And I was invited to speak to a group in September, Concerned Women for America in D.C., and I hope to meet Coach Kennedy at that event. So I tell people, I give God the glory, and the Liberty Council did all the hard work. And this was this lady on the left. She tried to raise this flag in Nashua, New Hampshire, Save Women's Sports. They allowed her to do it, and then some people were upset about that, and they took it down. And she's now trying to. She might be filing a suit against the city on this subject too. So. And I think it's a lot of people have been I've been told that a lot of people want to raise flags, and so I think we're really making an impact. We're getting people to become citizens, become activists in your community. And here we are, this beautiful picture, July 2022, Camp Constitution. And so I want to just encourage you to people say, well, what should I do, Hal? What should I do? First I say, pray and ask God what He wants you to do. Right. You may be a gifted writer, but He may have you do something else. But there's so much. We've had a lot of organizations here You know, we had Pastor Whitney's group and Michael King's group and many other folks here. Some of those groups are worthy of support. Obviously, Camp Constitution. There's so many things you can do. We have year-round events. We've been putting on Camp Constitution for a day. I think we did two so far this year. We've got one coming up in northern Maine, which Reverend Kraft loves, especially when it's in December and it's 5 below zero. We had a great. We're by the Canadian border, and it was last December, and I got a picture of Edith, Mrs. Kraft, and I had to make sure the Canadian flag was flying so we would know the border, and I put a little caption. Edith Kraft smuggling Bibles into Canada. She said, "Don't say that. What's wrong with Canada needs Bibles?"